For 3 weeks I talked to the catatonic alien woman they pulled from the wreckage, reading her stories and telling her about my life. Never expecting a response, I just believed that even if she could not hear me, she deserved to be treated like a person instead of a body. Daniel Shaw leaned over Empress Valeth's prone form in his medical bay, adjusting her feeding tube with gentle hands. Her silver hair was a stark contrast against the sterile white linens beneath her. It had been cleaned and dried days ago, but still held traces of blood from when they first brought her in, a shell of an Ithori princess after the wreckage. "Hey there," Daniel said softly, his voice barely above a whisper as he adjusted her Roman IV drip. "It's me again, Daniel. Hope you're feeling all right today." She lay motionless beneath him, eyes closed and unseeing. She had not moved once since they brought her here from that destroyed ship orbiting the distant planet of Jorath V. There was no brain activity on human scanners, but Daniel refused to give up hope. "Today's a new day," he continued, as he began cleaning around her feeding tube with meticulous care. "You know how Earth folks say you should always start fresh. That's what I'm trying to do here." Daniel had been assigned her care 3 weeks ago, after the mission team brought in a silver-haired beauty from wreckage of their fleet, barely alive and completely catatonic. No one expected any response from her. No brain activity meant it was likely futile. But Daniel knew better than to give up on anyone just because they couldn't speak or move. She might not be able to hear him, but something deep inside him told him that treating a patient with dignity mattered more than anything else right now. Day 1, Daniel stood over her bed for the first time since being assigned, his heart heavy despite knowing it was unlikely she would ever respond. "Hey," he said gently, brushing away loose strands of her hair from her pale face. "I'm going to be taking care of you while we figure out what's wrong and how to help." He placed a small bag on the counter by the bed, filled with basic medical supplies and personal items, books for reading aloud, snacks for feeding her through the tube when she was awake enough, or just something nice like tea for himself as he watched over her. Day 7, Daniel picked up an old book from his collection, a classic adventure story set on Earth. "I figured you might be bored," Daniel mused to her still form. He had cleaned off the small table by her bed and placed the book there, opening it carefully before beginning to read aloud in a soothing voice. "Once upon a time." The first sentence hung between them as he started reading. Her eyes remained closed. She showed no signs of hearing him, or even acknowledging his presence beyond breathing steadily beneath his touch each day when checking her vitals and hygiene needs. Day 14, Daniel's hands paused over adjusting the Roman IV drip, looking down at Valeth lying motionless before him as he began recounting stories from home, growing up on a colony world, joining the medical corps out of compassion for others, his sister's wedding which had occurred while deployed. "She sent me pictures," Daniel murmured softly to her closed eyes. "Looked beautiful. Wished I could have been there." He carefully brushed away another strand of hair from Valeth's face as he spoke about those memories, missing important moments because duty called, but holding on to hope that one day she would be able to hear these words too. Day 20. When Daniel held her hand gently while cleaning around the feeding tube. "I don't know who you are," Daniel confessed, his voice soft and sincere as he gazed down at Valeth's still form with a mix of pity and hope in those warm brown eyes of his. "But I want to tell you something." He squeezed her fingers lightly. "If there's anything going on inside that head, anything at all, I'm here for it, okay? Even if no one else is looking for you right now, you're not alone." Daniel's hand lingered on hers a moment longer before letting go. Only then did he notice the faintest twitch in her fingers. It was subtly a tiny movement amidst hours of immobility. But Daniel didn't see it, too engrossed as ever in his monologue about simple human kindness and hope. A single tear slowly traced its way down Valeth's pale cheek without him noticing, another small sign that perhaps she wasn't entirely gone after all. He leaned back with a sigh, reaching for the book beside her bed, where he kept reading to pass time when duty called. "I'll keep talking," Daniel promised aloud, as if in response to some unseen force listening closely. Day 21. Morning. Daniel Shaw entered her room, his steps soft and steady on the tiled floor. He held a tray of breakfast he knew she could not eat, but still brought it anyway, routine becoming comfort in these uncertain times. Alongside the untouched meal was his coffee mug, already half filled with steaming liquid. Today's book rested securely under one arm. He paused at her bedside and set down everything gently on the small table beside her bed. "Good morning," he said softly, a whisper that seemed to fill the room despite its quietness. "I brought chapter 15, left off at a cliffhanger yesterday, which was probably mean of me." He opened the book, but his eyes didn't move past the page. Instead, they darted upwards toward her face. Her silver hair lay in smooth waves across the pillow, and for 3 weeks, she had always been perfectly still with closed eyelids. But today, those lids flickered open slowly, at first, then wider as if waking from a long sleep. Her eyes met his, silvery and luminous like moonlight on water. Daniel froze mid-breath, hand halfway to the book's cover. "Oh my God!" His voice cracked with surprise and something deeper, a realization that felt almost painful yet exhilarating all at once. "Can you hear me? Can you?" Valeth moved then, slow and deliberate, as if every motion cost her energy. Her hand reached out towards him, fingers trembling, but reaching nonetheless. She parted her lips in an effort to speak again after 3 weeks of silence. A whisper escaped, barely audible yet unmistakable. "Daniel." His name echoed through his heart like a distant bell ringing clear. He caught her hand with both of his own, the skin pale and cool beneath his warm touch. "Yes," he said, voice breaking into fragments despite himself. "Yes, I am Daniel. I am here. You are safe." Tears streamed down her face, not from sorrow, but a mixture of relief and something else that shone in her eyes. "Gratitude? Love." She tried to speak again, lips parting as she strained against the weight of silence, no longer binding them together. "I heard you," came another whisper after moments passed between breaths and words. "Every word, every day." She squeezed his hand weakly but firmly, a gesture that seemed both an affirmation and a lifeline thrown across decades apart. "Your voice brought me back." She almost smiled then, lips curling in the softest of curves before exhaustion reclaimed her. Daniel was crying too now, tears mingling with relief and wonder. He did not understand fully what she meant, or why his presence had mattered so deeply to someone he barely knew beyond their shared silence. But it didn't matter. All that mattered at this moment were these words spoken between them after weeks of isolation. He held her hand tightly in both of his, fingers interlaced, as if by some unspoken agreement neither could break away from now. "Who are you?" Daniel asked gently, despite knowing the answer might change everything he believed about himself and those around him since day one. She almost smiled again, softer this time, with a trace of laughter barely hidden beneath pain's grip loosening its hold on her body for once. "I am Valeth," she whispered back, before falling asleep. Her hand remained in his grasp, like an anchor to sanity long lost amidst cosmic voids and forgotten hopes. He sat there for 6 hours straight, holding on to her until every breath came easier than the last, until her sleep was peaceful instead of tense and haunted. He still did not know she was Empress, or that entire galaxies searched endlessly for someone who lay here now, fully present in their shared world once more, just because one small voice refused to give up hope while hers faltered. And it felt like everything, simply knowing he made a difference even when none could see his efforts, except perhaps through her eyes wide and silvery, open again at last. Day 23. The morning sun filtered through the station's glass walls, casting a gentle golden hue over Valeth's room. Daniel entered, as he did each day, tray in hand and book under one arm, prepared for another routine of care. He felt different from the first 2 weeks she had moved before. She spoke once. "Good morning," Daniel said softly, setting down her breakfast and his coffee on the table beside her bed. He turned to look at her as he always did now, seeing a flicker in those silvery eyes that hadn't been there 3 days ago, when she first opened them to acknowledge him fully. She was sitting up today, propped against pillows with her back straight, but not entirely steady yet. Her hand reached out toward his almost instinctively, the same movement repeated each day now as if it were becoming a bond stronger than words could convey. "Good morning," Vailith whispered in return, her voice still frail and delicate, but carrying more strength behind its edges compared to the days before she spoke for the first time. Daniel took hold of her hand, gently, his thumb brushing over hers reassuringly without breaking eye contact. "What would you like me to read today?" he asked softly, opening the book that had become a bridge between them in this strange world where silence once reigned supreme. "Can you continue reading 1,000 Splendid Suns?" "I enjoyed it very much," Vailith replied, her gaze never leaving his as she listened with an intensity that was almost mesmerizing. It felt right to hold hands while he read. They both knew why, without needing words to explain the significance of this gesture. Daniel nodded and began reading aloud from the book, feeling a strange connection with its pages more than ever before due to their shared quiet world turning into something far richer now that she responded in kind. Vailith listened closely, her fingers tightening around his as if afraid letting go would mean losing touch with reality itself once again. As he read on, Daniel felt himself relax. Something about reading aloud to someone who truly listens and cares for each word is incredibly grounding and comforting. When he looked up from the book afterward, she was still staring at him intently, a question in her eyes that needed no words asked aloud. "What do you want me to tell you?" Daniel prompted gently with his voice, steady despite the emotions swirling within. Vailith hesitated briefly before speaking softly yet firmly. "Tell me about your life. I know nothing of yours or where we are." Daniel smiled warmly and started sharing parts of himself he had never felt comfortable talking about in front of anyone else, not even those closest to him, because it mattered now that she was here, listening with an intensity that made every word feel important. He told her about growing up on a small farming planet far from the stars where most space-born humans lived. He described his path through medical school and how he ended up in his current role at this station, despite preferring quieter roles closer to home planets rather than interstellar outposts bustling with aliens and warships. Listening intently, Vailith's grip tightened on his hand, as if she was holding on to him equally tightly within her own mind. "It sounds like a difficult journey," she said when he paused for breath, her voice filled more now with genuine curiosity and understanding that went beyond simple interest in facts, but rather an emotional connection to his struggles. Daniel nodded, feeling oddly at peace talking about such things so openly, after keeping them mostly private even from friends back home. "It was hard sometimes, but it led me here," he admitted quietly, as if recognizing just how much more meaningful this place had become with her presence among the shadows of unknowns that once defined his existence. Vailith looked at him again, a mixture of emotions in those silvery eyes, no awe, wonder, perhaps even something approaching warmth and affection. "Thank you," she said simply but meaningfully. It was enough to know they shared this moment together, where nothing else mattered, except the present unfolding between them despite vast gulfs still separating many unknowns about their true connections. Day 25 brought a sudden urgency none of them were prepared for. Alarms blared throughout the station, startling both Daniel and Vailith from their quiet world cocooned in books and conversations held hand in hand. "Chips detected," the announcement crackled over intercom systems, just as the door to her room slammed open. Station Commander Thorne burst inside, his face pale, with alarm visible even under the harsh lights illuminating every detail of shock etched into it. "Hundreds of them," he panted out between breaths. "Command is telling us a massive alien fleet approaches. They are demanding immediate surrender." His words broke off mid-sentence when he saw her sitting up beside Daniel, their hands clasped together tightly despite the chaos erupting around them. "Your Majesty," Thorne's voice rose sharply above the throne world was a place of grandeur and awe, its halls lined with polished marble floors that gleamed under the soft glow of floating lights. The air thrummed with anticipation as Daniel found himself standing alongside Empress Valeth in what felt like an eternity, since their quiet sanctuary had been breached by the urgent chaos of interstellar politics. 2 weeks later, they arrived at the heart of this grandeur, the throne room, where thousands gathered to witness a spectacle that no one could have predicted. The regal chamber was adorned with banners and statues paying homage to generations past, each piece telling tales of valor and dominion. Yet today's proceedings promised something far more profound. Daniel had been brought along despite his protests. Valeth insisted he stay by her side, their hands never truly letting go even as the crowd around them thickened. "You saved me," she said firmly when Daniel tried to argue about leaving behind her, "and I am keeping you with me." Her voice was a command, but it carried an undercurrent of gratitude and resolve that silenced his objections. The throne room filled rapidly until every seat was occupied, the murmurs growing louder as they waited for their empress. Regent Knelt stood in chains at one side of the chamber, his presence marking him out as both accused and convicted before any trial had formally begun. Daniel glanced nervously from Valeth to Knelt, but said nothing, knowing better than to intrude on this moment that was clearly not just about him. "Your Majesty," a voice called out when she finally stepped into view, her movements slow yet deliberate. The air seemed to hold its breath as everyone turned towards her, watching intently for any sign of the drama they knew must follow. Valeth approached the center platform with Daniel at her side, their hands entwined so tightly it was almost a declaration in itself. She faced the crowd then, and her voice rang out clear even over the hushed whispers that had begun to spread through the gathered masses. "I am here today, not just as Empress, but also as one who has returned from darkness." She began softly yet with immense authority. "My body might have survived the assassination attempt, but my mind retreated into itself. For 3 weeks I could hear everything around, mere fears, your whispers, but I was unable to respond." Her words were met by a hush that seemed to draw out each syllable as they echoed through the room. "I am alive today because of one person," Valeth continued without pause or hesitation, her gaze turning directly towards Daniel. "A human who did not know my identity nor seek any reward from me for his care." Daniel felt the eyes on him sharpen, but kept them locked with hers, knowing that this moment was as much about her journey back to life as it was about their shared connection. "He held my hand and spoke to me when I could give nothing in return," Valeth went on. "He read stories until he thought maybe someone would come out of the shadows." Daniel swallowed hard but nodded affirmatively, his heart swelling with emotions he never knew were possible. She squeezed his hand again tightly before continuing. "His voice became my anchor. It brought me back from where I was lost." A few gasps rippled through the crowd at this admission, yet no one dared break the silence as she turned fully towards him now. Valeth looked directly into Daniel's eyes and said with a mixture of gratitude and strength, "Would you stay by my side forever? Not out of duty but because I choose it." Her words were like soft lightning striking through every soul present, compelling all to hold their breath until they learned what his response would be. Daniel met her gaze unflinchingly. He knew the moment was significant, not just for them both, but for everyone observing this unique bond. With a gentle touch on her face, a gesture that spoke volumes without needing words, she leaned in close and whispered, "I promised I wasn't going anywhere." As he pulled back slightly to look at her once more, Daniel saw clarity and warmth reflecting back at him from those silver depths. "And now," Valeth said as she placed both hands around his neck gently but firmly, drawing herself closer so that their foreheads almost touched. "You are mine by choice." She paused briefly before adding softly, "My person." The room seemed to hold its breath in shared anticipation. Then suddenly, it erupted into applause, a thunderous roar of support and celebration for a bond formed out of kindness and survival. Valeth kissed Daniel then, their lips meeting with softness that conveyed all the unspoken promises between them. It was an act so tender yet defiantly public. Everyone watching knew this moment marked more than just two individuals finding solace in each other's presence. It symbolized a whole empire learning about true leadership through compassion and mutual respect. When she pulled away, Daniel looked out across the assembled masses, seeing not judgment,